Namaste, greetings and welcome. Welcome to our new series on healing, the keys to permanent healing of the body, mind and spirit. My name is Pola Churchill. I'm author of the book Shiva Mahavatar Babaji. This is a book about the Yogi Christ of India. I'm also author of the book Eternal Breath, a biography on Leonard Orr, founder of Rebirthing. In this series, I'm going to introduce you to some powerful healers from around the world and also their different healing modalities. Today we're going to talk about rebirthing breathwork and what a powerful tool this is. So what I want to do now is introduce you to Sondra Ray, one of the most powerful spiritual leaders of today. She's known as Mother of the Rebirthing Movement. She's one of the earlier pioneers of rebirthing along with Leonard Orr. She is an expert on how birth affects your body, your relationships, your career. She's author of 17 books, and she's known throughout the world as being an author, lecturer, and healer. So please welcome Sondra Ray.
Thank you,
Thanks
Paula.
for coming today. It's
My
great
pleasure.
to see you.
Thank you.
Gosh, I remember the first time I got rebirth was 20 years ago in Sydney, Australia, during one of your LLT trainings.
That's right.
And I tell you something, you look just the same.
Really?
You must be still youthing. You look fabulous.
Oh, great. Oh, keep on breathing.
That's right. You must be doing something good. Anyway, so let's go back to the beginning when you were a nurse and you were looking for answers to your own personal healing process, and you weren't finding the answers through medicine, your own field. So tell me how you met Leonard Orr and how you started at Theta House and how you started rebirthing.
Okay, well, I had two serious problems. One was my hair was falling out, and I was losing my hair
goodness.
rapidly, and I was wearing wigs for 2 years, and I was really worried that I was going to go bald. I had a big bald spot up here.
Oh, my goodness.
And then I had pain in my body that was quite bad for about 15 years straight, which started at my father's death.
Oh.
And even though I knew it was psychosomatic, it really hurt, and no one could help me with these problems, you know. So when I came to California through a mystical experience I had, I was guided to be part of the great experiment of rebirthing. I was one of the first people who ever tried it on.
Right.
And so after my first rebirth, I just felt so much better. And after 3 rebirths, my pain disappeared forever. It never came back. So this is why I wanted to become a rebirther.
So you were getting the
longer.
results.
It took longer for my hair to grow back, but it did, because I worked out this consciousness factor of loss from my divorce.
Right, so you had to process the thought that was going on,
Exactly.
in other words, to heal it.
Yes, I couldn't find out in medicine what was the causative factor, but when I started rebirthing, I got to find out the causative factors of my problems, and then I breathed it out. So I was healed, and so I decided I should give up medicine and share this with everybody, and I've been traveling ever since.
Well, that's a tough commitment to make, being in the field of medicine and then making that jump, making that leap, the leap into the unknown. So can you describe to us that first rebirthing session when you were in the hot tub? I think it was in 1974 in the Ventura Lodge.
Right, and it was, fortunately, out in the woods. We had plenty of space and privacy, and there was 10 of us, and we stayed in the sleeping bag most of the day to get activated. Then he put us in the hot tub one by one, and I think I was the second or third person. And when I got in the hot tub and started breathing in the snorkel, it was so powerful. I just, all this energy came through me, and it was so exciting. And I started seeing auras, and I just had a miracle, and I just loved it. And after, in a couple of sessions, my pain disappeared totally because of this energy moving through.
Wow. Did you actually see anything of your birth? Any memories, or it was just more the feeling?
It was mostly the feeling. I'm not such a visual person, but I was feeling. I wanted to let out a big scream, and I felt all these changes going on in my body, but the main thing is I felt the pain physically moving out for the first time.
That's good. So to explain to people who've never done the rebirthing process, you would be in a jacuzzi, in a hot water tank with a snorkel on, face down, and you'd have somebody holding you and while you're breathing through it.
Originally, that's how we started, and we had the water a bit too hot back then, but we started out that way with only wet rebirthing. Now we have dry rebirthing, of course, too. But we would roll up in the fetal position, so to speak, in this warm water, and this would assimilate the womb, and so you'd feel like you were in the womb, and you could have memories all the way back to the womb, which was astonishing to us.
And then you discovered dry rebirthing. And there was an incident, wasn't there?
There was a real interesting moment there. I had gotten hold of this book, Birth Without Violence by Dr. Le Boyer, who's an obstetrician, and he very adequately describes each section of the delivery. And so it was so well written and so activating. I said to Leonard, let's have the client read this before we put them in the tank. So we had this guy sitting on the couch between us. His name was Stephen. And I said, Stephen, would you just read this out loud, and then we're going to put you in the tank.
So
it was all about how the baby comes from the womb, starts the process of the delivery. And he got so activated that before we even got him in the tank, he went into a full-on spontaneous breathing session, and he was having vivid memories of birth, just sitting on the couch. And we had no choice but to just keep him there and take him through it. And we were astonished that we didn't need to have the water for the memory of the birth. So from then on, we realized it was the breath done in a certain way, in the presence of someone who's released their birth trauma. So that day changed our lives, because then we could travel all over and do rebirthing anywhere in the world without having to find a hot tub.
Oh, that makes things a lot easier, doesn't it? So can you explain the benefits of the benefits and the differences between dry rebirthing and wet rebirthing, and what each one brings up?
Well, the breath is the same. It's a circular, smooth breath with no holding at the top or no holding at the bottom. So that's always the same, no matter if it's dry or wet. The dry rebirthing, you lie on the floor or on the bed with your clothes on, and you breathe for at least an hour in this circular, smooth breathing. And if it's a private session, it's wonderful because you have the total attention of the rebirther for 1 hour straight, and they guide you through it.
Right, and they have the choice to breathe either through their nose or through their mouth.
Right, in and out through the nose or in and out through the mouth. And we suggest people learn both. But anyway, the wet rebirthing has the added feature of the warm water, which does relax you more, and so it does give you a kind of a different experience, and you're down under the water where you can't hear anything, and so there's nothing to distract you. It's just you and God. There's no noise, and it's very powerful, and I think it's a little bit more powerful than dry rebirthing. So now when we introduce a new person to rebirthing, we start with the dry rebirthing first, and we do 10 sessions before we put them in the water, because the water is very activating.
That brings up prenatal states of consciousness, the wet rebirthing, so it's more activating.
And that's hot water rebirthing. And then, of course, we even have cold water rebirthing, which is even more activating. And that is good for releasing anesthesia in the body if the person had a lot of anesthesia at their birth.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's also good for releasing death programming. So I think that one eventually has to learn all of these: dry rebirthing, wet rebirthing, hot and cold. And but cold is more advanced.
Absolutely. And then they can start to learn to breathe by themselves.
Yes, someday when the rebirther feels they're ready. But we would certainly recommend they had 10 dry sessions with a female and then 10 dry sessions with a male, because different things come up with a female than they do with a male.
Clears mother-father stuff.
Right.
Good. So how does the birth trauma affect our relationships, our body and career? Because you're the expert on this. Can you give us an example?
Sure. This is really interesting because my clients started coming to me and telling me all their problems with sex and marriage and relationships. And then I would rebirth them, and they would have a vivid birth memory, and I could see the correlation how what happened at their birth was affecting their relationships. And it was like light bulbs going off in my head. I was so excited, and I didn't dare tell anybody about this because it was too new, this research.
So you could see certain patterns evolving in your clients.
Yes, like, let's just say there was a male baby, and it was a big baby, maybe it was a breech baby, and his mother was hurt during the birth because he was too big, or it was a breech going backwards, And so he might have a pre-verbal thought, I hurt women. So that thought is pretty suppressed his whole life. He's not aware of it. But when he grows up and starts going out with women, he might unconsciously hurt them because of that thought, because thoughts produce a result. So that's just a simple example. Or if a woman is growing up with the thought, men hurt me, because she was hit by a male doctor, then her thought
the
is
obstetrician, right?
Men hurt me, and his thought is I hurt women. So you can see
how they dovetail. Absolutely,
right? And then of course each different type of birth has different results. I mean, the forceps type birth is different than the cesarean, and we've studied all these different kind of births and how they affect relationships. I wrote a whole book on that, birth and relationships.
Could you just run through a few of those birth types? What a cesarean might be thinking.
Yes, of course, a cesarean, we wouldn't want to know if it was a planned cesarean or if it was emergency cesarean. If it was an emergency cesarean, there's tremendous drama at the birth. It's like surgery, there's blood. Sometimes the father would faint if he was present. So these people have a lot of drama in their life.
So cesareans might have the thought that they can't complete by themselves.
They might have that thought, and they usually do. And they need to be lifted out of things. So
they might have the thought, I can't do it by myself.
Right. If you hear a bunch of cesareans talking together at a table, they don't even finish their sentences, and they all understand each other because they're used to being incomplete. Yeah. And they tend to have an interruption pattern.
Isn't that interesting? It's fascinating. And what about forceps?
Yes, forceps. I used to date some men who were forceps, and you feel like you have to pull them out.
You have to get them
come
going.
on, let's get going, and sort of that kind of energy. And you have to find out why they were forceps. Why didn't they want to come out? And sometimes they were stuck. Other times they were the wrong sex and they knew they weren't going to be accepted, so they held back and they resisted. So we as rebirthers would always try to find out why they were forceps in the first place. And then the amazing thing for me when I was rebirthing people is sometimes the marks would show up on their head. And you could see the placement during the session. Right. You could see the placement of the forceps. And sometimes it was dangerously close to the eyes and in the ears. And so these people have a lot of trauma, and sometimes they get migraine headaches because of this,
Okay, so that's very interesting how each birth thought affects your mind, affects your body. What about anesthesia, when the anesthesia stays in the body?
It does. It goes through the placenta to the baby, and it stays in the baby's body. And I'll give you some examples. Leonard and I rebirthed a psychiatrist in Paris, and during the session, this smell of anesthesia came out of his body so strong that we had to run to the window. And I asked him, have you ever had surgery or anything since your birth? He had never even been in the hospital since his birth. And at the end, he started shouting, "Oh, I didn't know what it was like to be alive." He felt so great. And then I had a group once that a lot of the people in the group in the LRT had anesthesia, and they attracted each other. And the air conditioning broke, and the Freon came through the room, and we all got really dizzy, and we had to run outside, and we had to finish the training outside.
Oh my goodness.
So I have quite a lot of experience with anesthesia, and sometimes people fall asleep in the rebirthing because of their anesthesia, and we have to sit them up or do something to keep them breathing it out. Sometimes cold water rebirthing.
Oh, that will wake them up, that's for sure. Tell me what the personal law, personal lie is.
Okay, the personal lie is your most dominant negative consciousness factor from your birth. Could be formed at birth itself or in the womb, or it could even come from a past life. But it's your core belief about yourself, and it's formed early on. We call it a pre-verbal thought, and babies make very sophisticated decisions at birth. Like, for example, if a baby was not wanted, they might have a thought, "I'm not wanted." If they were the wrong sex, they might have the thought, "I'm wrong," or "I'm a disappointment," or "I'm not lovable," and "I'm not good enough." And some of these thoughts are very common for people. And what happens is this thought tends to create havoc in their life and ruins their life, and it keeps getting activated. Let's say a person who isn't wanted, they may keep attracting partners who don't want them, and they're suffering so much. And when they get to rebirthing, we can help them release this thought from the cells, because it's almost like an addiction, this thought.
Oh, it's a core belief that runs your life, isn't it? Because we get addicted to that thought because we survived on it, so we think we have to keep running that.
And then the mind proves it. So whatever if you think you're unlovable, you're going to keep attracting
so whatever
people
you
won't love
create,
you.
the mind, you create that, and then the mind goes, "See, I am unlovable."
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing how tricky the mind is.